Do we do that? Okay, so what I want you to be able to think about before this afternoon, if you didn't do a SWOT analysis, is I want you to think of at least 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses of your organization, because we're going to do a team activity around 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. So you can cram somewhere along the way today, but just think about 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. Stephanie, do you have anything to say to anybody?
No, I was missing one and I found it, so here's the lunch for it. I think everything else is good. We did move the room around, not to throw everybody for a loop, but just because it's better for communication since this is the number of people we're having. And welcome back. I'm glad to see you back as well.
Yeah. So make sure you think about your 2 strengths and your 2 weaknesses, and we'll do something later on today with that. Did you find at least 3 RFPs for each of your NIAID codes? You did, good.
Not for each one.
But at least you found a code, okay. Good, how about the rest of you? Did you find some? All right, did you get a chance, did you read through them to come up with your questions?
Michael was. He couldn't be here, but he'll make it up.
Okay.
Did everybody sign this? Yeah. Here's your clicker.
Great, thank you.
We're not.
Did you get a chance to read through the RFPs? What questions do we have about the RFPs?
I saw one that, as you scroll down just on the first, like not even breaking into the clause, but just the information underneath, that showed, like it says, this is currently an unfunded requirement with high expectation funds will be available when and if funds become available, contract will be awarded at that time.
Yeah.
Is there any stipulation to be able to tell when and how long? Because that's one key problem we have, is doing all this work.
I want you to come back up with me to Washington, and you can talk to all the Democrats and the Republicans, and you can ask them when all this is going to get funded.
I would really rather not.
Yeah, I'm starting to notice that on a lot. The other thing you're going to see is, statements that say requirements are being delayed because there's such a big backlog. I mean, just to give you a perspective, when I've worked with companies for a long time to help them get on GSA schedules. So this is actually a task that you work with a contractor to put their proposal together. That's all on the contractor. And then we submit it over to the government, and they review it, and then they conduct a source evaluation on it. And that process has been, I've worked with companies, and we've gotten that whole thing done in a month. So the contractors have gotten their proposal in, we've negotiated with the government's reviewed it, we've had negotiations, and it's a done deal at the end of the month. The government shut down for 3 days, and that took it up to like a 9-month delay. So, we're still feeling the ramifications of this 35-day
It's
thing.
kind of like a space-time equivalent. For
Exactly. There's no linear regression that we can use to show us what it's going to take. So, yeah.
Because that was one red flag, because we were trying to include, like, the owner of Lawrence Brothers, and so he's also currently opening up, other businesses and stuff, so he's a hard man to catch right now. But we just showed him one, and I highlighted that, and he caught the highlighted section, because I wanted to ask a question about it, and he was like, no, we're not signing up for any of that, none of that. So I'm like, well, you may have to, but.
How many other people saw that on your... Because, it's not the whole government that was shut down. So there are some agencies out there that are still, procuring, rapidly. Like I have a contract with National Science Foundation, and they needed, I was doing an executive leadership session with them, and sent over all the stuff, and they said, we received it, we can't get to it for a while, but, and it's March 1st that we're actually supposed to do it. So they're just behind the 8 ball right now. And quite honestly, when we're in this mode like we are again with this not sure yet, that causes problems too.
Would you personally try to veer away from those? Because this is actually a job for the U.S. Army, so it's like, would you kind of veer away from those and try to not even dip your toe in the water? Would you go
Well,
ahead and?
yeah, I would keep my thumb on it because, you know, the government, the good thing about the government is they won't formally announce a requirement until they have funds. You know, so once they have funds and it's in FedBiz Ops, they will tend to go through it. Now, they do still have the opportunity to cancel, so you always run that risk. They try not to do that because they need us as part of their industrial base. You know, if they have more of us, what does that mean to them? Costs go down why? Competition, right? So they need us, and so they don't want to tick us off. So that's why they tend not to cancel solicitations. And I told you last week, or last time, that they always have that clause, once you win a contract, that they can still cancel it if it's convenience of the government. But they, again, that's very rarely. Yeah, and we're just in a crazy time right now. What other questions did you have about the RFPs?
If you produce a product, are you probably going to be working with requests for quotes more than requests for proposals?
Okay, so there's a couple things that are at bay here, so, and we're going to talk about this today when it comes to market research. So there's actually a requirement that the government has that they have to conduct market research, which means they have to go out to industry and get a sense of what you guys do and how you do it. So remember we had the conversation last time about how we switched from statements of work to performance work statements, and we said that when the government changed to just coming up with a standard and everybody had to meet it, what happened was that it changed the risk element, so the risk was on the government because they were defining all the requirements, and now they're pushing them onto you, and you know, you're defining it, so you're drafting the contract and you're the one that's ultimately responsible. So when the government made that shift, the other thing that they did was they used to do a lot with military specifications called mil specs, and everything was clearly defined. So if you think about federal procurement, in the beginning there were very few contractors that would play in the government's backyard, right? Because it was complicated, and you know, they made probably they knew somebody initially that got those beginning contracts, and what they did was it was mostly sole source. Every time the government had a requirement, it went to very few companies as a sole source type procurement. And then those companies who had these sole source procurements tended to take advantage of the government, right, and charge more and more, and basically gouge the government. So the pendulum swung all the way up here. And then the government said, okay, we can't do that anymore. We have to have competition in contracting to get this competitive pricing going and to lower our prices. So now we need, the pendulum swings back the other way, and we move more into the Competition and Contracting Act, which were actual requirements that said, we, the government, shouldn't be doing most of our procurement through sole source. We should be doing most of our procurement through competitive negotiations. So then it swung this way, and then I'm going to get to the answer to your question in a minute. We get to the other end, and we're into competitive negotiations. And now lots of companies are jumping in because the price of the barrier to entry is low, right? Because just like all of you can put proposals into the government, you're able to reduce your costs because you have access, you're able to get into the government space. So when the government started moving into this Competition and Contracting Act, they also started moving into something called commercial items, because in the old days, when they were using all these military specifications, this is where you got the $600 hammer and the $300 toilet seat, because the government felt that they were so special and so unique, and their requirements were so different than everybody else, that when they had to very clearly define what those specifications were, because if you only have one company and you say, produce a toilet seat cover, or a toilet seat for me, and they produce it and you're happy with it, you just, okay, I need 100 more, I need 1,000 more, I need whatever. But when you have companies, a lot of different companies coming in, just like you look at your product lines, you're all different, right? And even if you sell the same product, your product might be different in various ways. So then the government had to say, okay, this is what our specifications are, and any company who wants to play has to meet all these specifications. So we went into this really heavy-duty specification mode, and the government required that of any contractor who wanted to play, and that's why the prices went up. So they introduced competition and contracting. When they introduced that, they had to bring in these military specifications. Once they did that, it got so cumbersome, then they came back and said, okay, we're going to move to something commercial items. So in theory, what the government is trying to do is buy exactly the way you sell. Let me say that again. The government is trying to buy the exact same way you sell. The problem is, do all of you sell the same way? Not so much, right? So the government conducted an audit. There was a corollary event that was occurring as well. And that was that the government has to figure out how much money to request for these various products and services that they're buying. And they don't have that knowledge internally. They have to come to the contractor community to get it. And what they need to prepare, based on the FAR, is something called an IGCE, which is an independent government cost estimate. And that IGCE is their way, before they even put out the solicitation, the IGCE is their way to figure out how much this procurement should cost. How much should this product or service cost? And in order to be able to do the IGCE, they ask for requests for quotes, they ask for requests for information. They're trying to get you to educate them on how much it's going to cost to do this. So requests for quotes and requests for information can serve multiple purposes. If it's a straight request for information, the government is using it to help prepare for this IGCE. And the other requirement that's come down the pipe with the government is market research. They have to survey the market to find out how you, in particular, sell your products and services, so they can figure out how to bundle it. Remember we talked about bundling? If we're going to build this learning room, we could buy we could have one contractor responsible for the tables, for the chairs, for the AV, and for building the room. Or we could say, I want a separate AV provider, I want a separate furniture provider. So in one case, the contractor acts as the general contractor. In the other case, the government acts as the general contractor. So when they conduct market research, they're trying to figure out how you do things on a day-to-day basis so that they can figure out how they should structure their RFP. So request for quote could just be a step in the market research process. It could just be a step in their developing the IGCE, or it could be that it's a small item purchase and they're asking for a request for a quote and they're just going to buy it on a purchase card.
And I think that's what I was seeing, that because sealed bids were also discussed in request for quote. If a follow-up question that I have to that is, if the government's trying to buy a commercial office shelf, and our business is focused on producing a cleaning product, would it be better to then, generally smaller purchases, it looks like, would it be better to focus on the GSA schedule? Or am I mixing apples and oranges?
No. So the first thing we would have to do is check to see if there is a GSA schedule that covers cleaning supplies.
Okay, I think there is.
Okay. So if that's the case, then you can develop a two-pronged strategy. One of having your team, if there are RFPs out there. When you looked at your RFPs, were they buying them off the GSA schedule or were they buying them outright?
Buying them outright.
Okay, so you might want to have a two-pronged strategy to be able to accommodate those customers that want to buy outright and then have a GSA schedule so that you can just have that as a passive marketing type thing. The one thing I did want to say, so keep in mind, invitation for bid and negotiated procurement are two different things. So when the government says they're going to do an invitation for bid, it's called an IFB, What that means is, they believe there's going to be no reason for questions. They don't believe, because as soon as that question phase opens up, either us to them or them to us, they consider that negotiations. And if they think there's going to be any questions, then it's going to go to, it needs to go to a negotiated procurement. So RFP is different than IFB. So in an IFB situation, let me give you a scenario. So, and this was a Maryland state procurement. They wanted an executive development program, and they wanted you to help them come up with the marketing and the logo. They wanted you to develop the content for a 2-day class for 15 executives that Maryland was going to, somebody in Maryland was going to pick as being part of this executive leadership program. And then they wanted mentoring sessions, coaching sessions, executive coaching. And what they said in the document, the actual requirements, was they wanted 5 sessions per person, and there were 15 people. So how many sessions are we talking about? Oh my gosh, she's asking us to do that. Let's go with 75. So 75 coaching sessions, but they were doing it as an IFB, invitation to bid. And when you looked at the pricing sheet, it said, how much is it going to cost for you to develop the logo and the marketing materials? How much is it going to cost for curriculum development? How much is it going to cost for delivering the courses for 2 days? And finally, what is your cost for executive coaching? And the quantity that they wanted was 5. And they said per session. So what's the problem? What did the RFP document require? Or, I'm sorry, the IFP, the actual technical requirements, what did it require?
Individual session, right?
And how many of them?
75.
75. And then the pricing sheet said this executive coaching, and the total quantity was 5. So what is that? It's a mistake, right? There's a disconnect
That's
in
one way to
their,
phrase it, yeah.
right, in their IFB, there's a mistake. So we raised the question to them before the public bid opening. Yeah. What do you want here? Because it's a disconnect. And you know what they did? Canceled the whole solicitation. Because they, and we don't know if other companies ask questions in addition to what we asked, but notice that they couldn't do an IFB anymore, because if they did a public bid opening and we ignored the 5 quantity and changed it to 75 and multiplied that times an hourly rate, that could put us way out of the water. Another company who just bid 5 and won the contract at a lower price could then come back in after contract, and when the government says, well, you only provided 5 executive coaching sessions, we needed 75, they could say, well, your pricing sheet only asked for 5, and they could do a change to the contract at that point. So this is the problem that happens with IFBs. And quite honestly, I've been teaching classes like this for 30 years, and I always ask the question, is anybody doing IFBs? And nobody in the federal government has ever said yes to that question. You see it a lot on the states, in state government procurements. They tend to do it. And the one thing you do see in federal is what GSA is doing, and I mentioned it last week, that reverse auctioning, where you log in at a certain time and you just have to beat the price. So those are, you don't see IFBs as frequently in the federal space. Did you see them? You saw an IFB. And what agency was that?
I didn't see it.
Oh, okay.
IFB. I saw a request for quote. It was one of the ones that I was.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's because, for them, even if they're buying toilet paper, if you go into any store and you look at toilet paper, I seem to be very potty focused this morning.
We need to take a break. Maybe it's something going on in here, because you did come in and come right in and get started. So.
I just think it's funny, all my examples tend to getting that direction. But, you know, toilet paper, if you go in, you know, you can buy the really thin ply, you can buy the cushy stuff. And so even something as simple as that, it's difficult for them to go straight out with an IFB. And in this case, and let me just